My husband begged me to come back. Within weeks, I realized the horrible truth. I should never have gone back. They say that absence makes the heart grow fonder. But in my experience, absence does something far more dangerous. It gives you your life back. It reminds you of the person you used to be before you allowed yourself to be slowly, quietly erased. Returning to my marriage after 8 months away was the single biggest mistake of my entire life. I am a 30-year-old woman, and for 8 beautiful, peaceful months, I was finally free. I was happy. I was sleeping through the night. I was looking in the mirror and recognizing the face looking back at me. And then, my husband came back into the picture. He brought with him a flood of tears, daily phone calls, middle-of-the-night text messages, and every single promise I had spent years begging to hear. He swore he had changed. He swore things would be different. He told me he finally understood the pain I was in. And because I am human, because 3 years of dating and a year of marriage don't just switch off like a light bulb, I believed him. I packed my bags a second time, and I walked right back into the trap. Now I am sitting in the exact same house, listening to the exact same heavy footsteps downstairs, realizing that I am nothing more than an unpaid, unappreciated servant in my own life. I am trapped with a mother-in-law who dominates every room she walks into, and a husband who vanishes into thin air the moment I need him to stand up for me. If you are sitting out there right now, contemplating giving a second chance to someone who refused to respect you the first time around, I need you to pause. I need you to sit down, and I need you to listen to my story. Because the cost of going back isn't just your time, it is your soul. To understand how I got here, we have to go back to the very beginning. My husband is 34, and I am 30. Before we took the plunge and got married, we dated for 3 solid years. During those 3 years, everything felt right. We were a team. We talked about the future, we shared dreams, and we built what I thought was a rock-solid foundation. But there was one major caveat that I didn't fully understand the weight of until the ring was on my finger. His parents were going to live with us. From the very first day we moved into our home as husband and wife, his parents were there. Now, I want to be clear. I didn't enter into this arrangement with bitterness. I wanted to be a good wife. I wanted to be a good daughter-in-law. I told myself that family takes care of family and that we could make it work. But what I didn't realize was that I wasn't being welcomed into a family as an equal partner. I was being brought in as a replacement for a domestic worker. Very quickly, the entire household began to run exclusively on my labor. And I don't just mean that I did my fair share of chores. I mean everything. I woke up early every single morning to ensure breakfast was prepared. I managed the grocery lists, tracking the dietary preferences of 4 separate adults. I did the laundry, I cleaned the floors, I scrubbed the bathrooms, and I anticipated every single need before it was even voiced. The most frustrating part of this dynamic wasn't just the physical exhaustion, though the exhaustion was bone deep. It was the fact that I was doing all of this for 2 fully grown, perfectly capable, able-bodied adults who were entirely suited to take care of themselves. My mother-in-law and father-in-law didn't have any medical conditions preventing them from lifting a finger. They simply chose not to. Because in their minds and traditional worldview, this was a woman's job. And because my husband had grown up watching his mother do everything, he implicitly expected the exact same thing from me. Compounding the sheer volume of work was my mother-in-law's personality. She is a deeply dominating, controlling woman. She didn't just want the house clean, she wanted it cleaned her way, on her schedule. If I placed a dish in the wrong cabinet, I heard about it. If dinner wasn't served at the exact minute she deemed appropriate, the passive-aggressive comments would start. She would critique the way I dressed, the way I spoke, and the way I managed my time. It was an environment of constant, suffocating surveillance. I could never just sit on the couch and relax, because if she saw me resting, she would immediately find a task for me to do, or sigh loudly to ensure I felt guilty for taking a moment to breathe. My husband, the man who had promised to protect me and cherish me, became a ghost in his own home. Whenever his mother overstepped, whenever she made a cutting remark about my cooking or questioned my capabilities, he would look down at his phone. He would leave the room. He would suddenly remember he had an errand to run. If I confronted him about it later in the privacy of our bedroom, he would sigh, roll his eyes, and tell me I was being overly sensitive. He would say, "She's just old-fashioned," or "She doesn't mean anything by it. Just let it go for the sake of peace." But it wasn't his peace that was being bought. It was mine that was being sold. Last year, I finally hit a wall. It didn't happen gradually. It happened all at once on a random Tuesday. I had worked a grueling 10-hour shift at my job. I was tired, my head was pounding, and all I wanted to do was come home, take a hot shower, and eat a quiet meal. Instead, the moment I walked through the front door, I was met with a barrage of demands. The kitchen was a disaster zone. Pots and pans from lunch were piled high in the sink. My mother-in-law looked up from the television and, without even greeting me, asked what time dinner would be ready because she was getting hungry. I looked at my husband, who was sitting on the armchair next to her, completely relaxed, watching a game. He looked up, smiled, and said, "Yeah, honey, what's for dinner? We've been waiting for you." Something inside me snapped. A cold, heavy realization washed over me. I am not a wife in this house. I am not a partner. I am an unpaid, invisible servant. I am the machinery that keeps their lives comfortable while my own life is slowly bleeding away. I didn't start cooking. Instead, I walked upstairs to our bedroom, pulled my largest suitcase out of the closet, and began throwing my clothes into it. My husband followed me up a few minutes later, confused, asking what I was doing. When I told him I was leaving, the confusion turned into anger. A massive, explosive, dramatic fight erupted. The years of suppressed resentment, the hundreds of unanswered pleas for help, and the deep hurt of being ignored all came pouring out of me. He yelled that I was being dramatic, that I was abandoning my marital duties, and that I was disrespecting his parents. His mother came to the top of the stairs, chiming in, accusing me of being ungrateful and selfish. But for the first time in a long time, their words couldn't reach me. The noise turned into static. I zipped my bag, walked past them both, ignored my father-in-law staring from the living room, stepped out the front door, and drove away. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I could never step foot in that building again. Those next 8 months were, without a single shred of doubt, the absolute best months of my entire adult life. I managed to find a small, modest apartment close to my workplace. It wasn't luxurious, but the moment I turned the key in the lock and stepped inside, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The air felt lighter. For the first few weeks, I did nothing but rest. I slept properly for the first time in literally years. I didn't realize how much anxiety I carried until I woke up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning and realized nobody was waiting for me to make breakfast. Nobody was judging the way I lived. I could leave a coffee mug in the sink for 2 days if I wanted to, and the world wouldn't end. As the months rolled on, I began to heal. I started taking small trips. They weren't extravagant vacations, just weekend drives to neighboring towns, hiking trips, and quiet afternoons spent on the beach with a book. But those trips were completely, entirely mine. I didn't have to check in with anyone. I didn't have to plan around someone else's rigid schedule. I cooked exactly what I wanted to eat whenever I felt hungry. I caught up on every single television show and movie I had been putting off because my mother-in-law controlled the living room TV. More importantly, I started going out again. I met new people, colleagues for drinks, local hobby groups, people who just knew me as me. They didn't know me as a stressed-out wife or unsubmissive daughter-in-law. They just knew my name, my laugh, and my personality. I was transforming back into the person I used to be before my marriage swallowed me whole. I remember standing in front of my bathroom mirror one night, brushing my teeth, looking at the color back in my cheeks and the sparkle back in my eyes, and thinking to myself, wow, I actually really like this person. When did I stop being her? How did I let her go? I promised myself in that moment that I would never let anyone take her away from me again. But human emotions are complex, and history has a heavy gravity. Around the 6-month mark of our separation, my husband changed his strategy. In the beginning, he had been angry and defensive, sending nasty texts about how I ruined the family. But when he realized that his anger wasn't working, and that I wasn't crawling back begging for forgiveness, he shifted. He began to call me every single day. He started sending incredibly long, beautifully written paragraphs detailing his remorse. He showed up at my workplace once, standing by my car with tears in his eyes, holding flowers, looking completely broken. He started saying every single word I had spent years desperately wanting to hear from his mouth. He would say, "I miss you so much. The house is empty without you. I finally see how much you did for us and how unfair I was. I've changed, I swear it. I've been talking to my parents, and things are going to be so different this time. Please, just give me one more chance to show you I can be the husband you deserve. Don't throw away 4 years of love." When you love someone, and you've invested years of your life into building a future with them, that love doesn't just evaporate because they treat you poorly. It stays there, beneath the surface, waiting for a reason to hope. Part of me wished I could just completely turn off my feelings, but I couldn't. I was human, and I was lonely for the partnership I always wanted. I looked at him, saw his tears, read his promises, and let my guard down. I convinced myself that maybe the shock of me actually leaving had finally broken through his denial. Maybe he really did see my value now. So with a heavy heart and a glimmer of desperate hope, I agreed to return. Within a matter of weeks, the crushing illusion shattered entirely. It was as if those 8 months of freedom, healing, and promises had never even existed. The moment I moved back in, the old patterns slid perfectly back into place like a well-oiled machine. I walked right back into the exact same house with the exact same overbearing in-laws and the same endless mountain of cooking, cleaning, and administrative management. Once again, I am waking up early to serve everyone. Once again, I am scrubbing toilets and washing dishes while 3 adults sit in the next room, completely oblivious to my existence. Nobody says thank you. Nobody notices the effort it takes. And my husband? The man who cried by my car and swore he had changed? He reverted instantly. The very first time his mother made a passive-aggressive comment about how my 8-month absence had disrupted the household structure, I looked at him, waiting for him to step in. He looked right past me, picked up his tablet, and ignored it. When I confronted him later, the same words came out of his mouth. "She's just glad you're back, honey. Don't make a big deal out of it." I realized with a sickening clarity that I am not a wife in this home. I am an asset. I am an unpaid domestic worker whose presence makes their lives easier, and his promises were nothing more than a recruitment speech to get the help back into the kitchen. The absolute worst part of this entire situation isn't even the fact that he lied. The worst part is the guilt I feel toward myself, because deep down, in the quietest corners of my soul, I think I already knew. I knew before I packed my bags to come back that people rarely undergo a fundamental personality transformation in a few months. I knew that his parents hadn't changed, and that he lacked the backbone to ever stand up to them. But I went back anyway. I went back because the desire to believe the lie was stronger than my willingness to accept the harsh truth. I wanted so badly for my marriage to work, and I wanted so badly to believe that love could conquer these systemic issues. The distance of those 8 months had created a beautiful, deceptive buffer. It made the old memories feel soft and romanticized. It made me forget the daily sting of being invisible. That distance made the marriage feel brand new and full of potential for about 5 minutes. And then the reality slammed down, and it was just exactly what it had always been. Same house, same dynamic, same suffocating, invisible feeling. Nothing changed because nothing was ever actually going to change. So here I am. I am 30 years old. We have no children, thank God, and we are technically only 1 year into this actual marriage, though we have been together for 5 years total. I know what the obvious answer looks like on paper. If a friend came to me with this exact story, I would tell her to run and never look back. But when you are inside the cage, the door looks a lot smaller. I decided to take a risk and post my entire story on a public forum online. I needed to type it out. I needed to see the words written down in black and white because I felt like I was losing my mind. I wanted to hear from people who had actually walked a mile in these shoes. I asked them, did anyone ever go back to a situation like this and actually have it work out? And if you left for good, how did you find the courage to do it when every single person around you, your family, your friends, society, acts as if you should just put your head down and be grateful that you have a marriage to come back to? I told them to be brutal, to be honest, because I could handle it. I asked the final, terrifying question. Should I stick around and keep trying to fix this, or should I pack my bags and move out permanently? Because there is one final detail you need to know. My husband flatly refuses to ever move out of this house with me. He told me explicitly that he intends to live with his parents always. That is his boundary. The responses I received from the online community were an absolute wake-up call. They stripped away the last remaining layers of my denial. The very first commenter laid the truth bare without any sugarcoating. They wrote, "You and your husband are simply not compatible. I can easily see why he wants you there. He is getting an incredibly sweet deal. He gets a wife who works, a chef, a maid, and a caretaker for his parents, all wrapped into one person. What I can't see is how you are benefiting from his desired living situation at all. Cut your losses and move on permanently this time, before you bring children into this mix." Let him take care of himself and his parents. Sadly, love is not enough. Reading those words, love is not enough, hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Because they were entirely right. I went back for love. I stayed for love. I swallowed my pride, my boundaries, and my happiness for love. And what has love actually changed about my daily reality? Not a single thing. Love doesn't clean the kitchen. Love doesn't stop my mother-in-law from treating me like a servant. Love doesn't give my husband a backbone. I still wake up every single morning to a heavy household that runs entirely on my labor. And I still sit across from a husband who looks at me and thinks that this is exactly how a marriage should be. The commenter helped me realize that we want completely, fundamentally different things from a marriage, and no amount of talking, crying, or going back and forth is ever going to bridge that gap. He wants a traditional, patriarchal household where the woman sacrifices everything for the family dynamic. I want a modern partner. I want a teammate. Those two completely different philosophies just cannot live inside the same house. Another commenter chimed in to reinforce this reality, writing, "People are very rarely able to fundamentally alter who they are at their core. And if it is the same dynamic even after you went away for 8 months and returned, there is absolutely zero hope for this to change in the future. You would be infinitely better off making a clean break and walking away from this permanently." I replied to them, agreeing. The distance didn't heal the marriage, it just temporarily blinded me to its flaws. The 5 minutes of novelty wore off, and the reality that nothing was ever going to change settled in. A third person wrote a very short, poignant message that cut straight to the core of my emotional paralysis. They wrote, "You already know the answer. Move on and go be happy. He is not willing to change for you." When I read that, the tears finally started flowing. Because I did know. I really, truly knew. My head had known the answer for months. But it is a very different thing to know something intellectually in your brain versus actually being emotionally ready to do something about it. My head was completely caught up with reality, but my heart was still lagging, grieving the future I thought I was going to have. It took a massive amount of courage for me to pack up and leave the first time, and I was completely shattered when I did it because of the death of my expectations. But at the very least, when I was living in that small apartment, I could actually breathe. Right now, inside this house, I feel completely, entirely caged. Then the conversation shifted to a very practical, logistical question. A commenter asked, "Were you able to live just fine financially on your own during those 8 months? Because if you can support yourself, you should go live your best life." I was proud to respond that yes, I am entirely financially independent. And this brought up an even darker layer of my marriage that I hadn't fully articulated before. Throughout our marriage, there has been an immense, relentless amount of pressure placed on me by my in-laws, specifically my mother-in-law, to quit my job. They wanted me to give up my career, stay at home full-time to focus entirely on managing the house, and immediately begin planning for a baby. I was completely adamant about not quitting my job. I fought tooth and nail to keep my career, and that resistance was actually one of the primary catalysts for the major fights that occurred before I walked out the first time. Looking back, I realized that the only reason I survived those 8 months of separation was that I had my own income. I had my own money, my own bank account, and a professional life that belonged entirely to me. My job wasn't just a career, it was my lifeline, my ticket out. That's when an incredibly powerful warning came from a mother on the forum. Her words are what finally broke the spell for good. She wrote, "If you have a baby with this man, you will be forever, permanently locked into this family. And that baby will grow up being raised to believe that your misery, your exploitation, and your lack of boundaries is the baseline norm for a relationship. If it is a girl, she will look at you and think that being a shell of a human being is her inevitable future. Is that what you want for your child? Would you want your child to watch her mother be completely hollowed out? You already know your answer. Your husband has given you his answer by refusing to move. It is sad and it is frustrating, but you have to accept it. I left a similar situation before, but I had a child with me. I had to start from an absolute scratch with nothing, and I built a beautiful life. Being able to sleep, being able to laugh, and not feeling the crushing weight of an ungrateful family means everything. You have nothing to lose by leaving you except yourself. Choose yourself." That comment sent a shiver straight down my spine. I imagined holding a little girl in that house, watching her grow up and seeing her observe her father ignore her mother while her grandmother ran the household with an iron fist. I imagined my child thinking that a woman's value is entirely tied to how much cooking and cleaning she can do without complaining. The thought made me sick to my stomach. I am already entirely exhausted right now, and it is just the two of his parents and us. If you add a newborn baby into this current dynamic, I wouldn't have the physical energy or the mental clarity to think straight, let alone plan an exit strategy. And as I sat there thinking about it, a terrifying realization washed over me. I think that is exactly what everyone in this house is counting on. They are putting pressure on me to have a child because they know it will trap me. They know that once a baby is here, I will be too tired, too financially strained, and too emotionally depleted to ever fight back or plan a way out. They want to break my spirit until I am too tired to want anything for myself anymore. But as I sat in my room reading those online messages, a fire lit up inside me. I whispered to myself, I refuse to let that happen. A baby? Absolutely no. Quitting my job? Absolutely no. That is the clearest, most definitive, most uncompromising no I have felt about anything in a very long time. For months, I felt weak, foolish, and confused for coming back. But reading the stories of other women who had started over with nothing and found happiness made me realize something. We often hear that women are incredibly strong, but it's usually said during times of suffering. Now, I see why they say it. True strength isn't about how much abuse or exploitation you can silently endure for the sake of keeping a broken home together. True strength is having the courage to look a comfortable lie in the eye, reject it, and choose the difficult truth. It is the strength to walk into the unknown because you value your own life too much to let it be wasted. Empowered women truly do empower women. Seeing the collective strength of those strangers online gave me the exact fuel I needed to kickstart my engine again. Before the thread closed, one final, incredibly sharp user asked a terrifyingly practical question. Is your birth control completely tamper-proof? Because this is the exact psychological point where a desperate husband will try to make you stick around by getting you pregnant.